The so-called final constitution of 1996 was a compromise. We all know that. The previous government believed that power could be shared evenly between groups of vastly uneven numbers. The ANC insisted, on the other hand, on majority rule in a unitary state. The Freedom Front then believed the Gordian knot could be cut by recognizing self-determination territorially and culturally. Let us turn to self-determination for a moment. It is an internationally recognized concept, revered by the ANC when applied to Palestine or the Sahrawi Republic, but it is demonized whenever someone wants to apply it to South Africa. Yet, in 2015, South Africa ratified the United Nations International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights of 1976. In Article 1, it states, all people have the right of self-determination. By virtue of that right, they freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic, social, and cultural development. And further on, the state parties to the present covenant shall promote the realization of the right of self-determination and shall respect that right in conformity with the provisions of the Charter of the United Nations. Now back to the Compromise of 1996. There is no power sharing in this unitary state, and although self-determination is recognized in the Constitution, the autonomy of Orania through its representative council is still its only application. But some traces of self-determination were included in the SA Schools Act of the same year, although never by that name. Let us attend to education post-1996. Schools were turned from state to public schools. That meant that communities, through school governing bodies, gained the function to determine a school's language and culture, while the state retained the authority to dictate learning content. At universities, historical white institutions were left untouched, while Afrikaans universities, except for Stellenbosch, were amalgamated with historical black universities or campuses, immediately altering their demographics. Historical black universities were either left intact or amalgamated with Afrikaans ones. Changes were indeed gradual. Pressure on Afrikaans schools came from both declining numbers and from departments, leading to some 10% of Afrikaans unilingual schools of 1994 still being that today. Universities tried to feed the crocodile by making concessions before they were forced to do so. The Gerwel recommendation that one university in the north and one in the south should remain Afrikaans were turned down. Each rather made its own concession, hoping to be left alone to do their work as they saw fit afterwards. The ANC, however, is intentional on transformation and will not be apologetic about it. That I learned in meetings of the Portfolio Committee for Higher Education. Allow me to remark that the committee consists of creative, intelligent, and lively members. Getting to know them is a highlight of the past 4 years. But on some issues, we just don't find each other. I once asked if transformation in higher education means that every class, resident, student association, department, faculty, and campus of every university should reflect the demography of the country as a whole. And the answer was affirmative. That would limit Afrikaans students to a maximum of 10% anywhere. The bellable, as we learned in the Committee for Basic Education, is necessary because when the department needs to confront SGBs on transformation, it needs the law on its side. Charterists and Africanist approaches to South African societies have one thing in common. For the nation to live, the tribe must die. The common language of learning and political participation is English, while so-called vernacular languages are relegated to the private sphere. Now, if most of the peoples in South Africa prefer to forgo their right to self-determination, it does not mean that all are obliged to do so. Afrikaans educators would normally rather die than invoke the right to self-determination. A constructive relation with the government would preclude that. And therefore, our own teachers diligently taught ANC ideology in schools as the only and undiluted truth for the past 30 years. Without excluding anyone on race, gender, or religion, cultural communities who prefer to do so should have the right to develop and manage public and private educational institutions. That can best be done by a cultural authority, which should be constituted under Section 235 of the South African Constitution. Such a cultural authority should invite private and public schools and post-school institutions to resort under it. Institutions wishing to do so should not be penalized by the state financially or otherwise, as it will be fulfillment of the commanding statement it ratified. All peoples have the right of self-determination, and the states shall promote the realization of the right of self-determination. I thank you.